When people ask me what I do, I normally tell them I teach people how to relax. But the truth is, I teach people how to get into altered states. Because altered states are one of the most important things you can be spending your time focused on. In your everyday, normal, waking consciousness, there's not a lot of change that can happen. Yes, you can go about your normal tasks, you can finish to-do list, you can do the laundry, you can pick the kids up from school. But oftentimes when we want change, when we want something that's amazing, some kind of transformation in our lives, it's going to take an altered state to get there. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different. By request, Britt and I are doing solo episodes. So today it's just me. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking to you about something that's going to be magical. We're going to talk about sex, drugs, and altered states.
Hey, we're Britt and Chris Carmichael, and you're listening to the Elevated Life Podcast. Throughout the 13 years we've been together, we've never ceased in our endless quest to better ourselves.
We've studied top experts, philosophers, and gurus. After years of personal self-experimentation, we found the tools for shifting your beliefs, moving through fears, and developing a positive mindset.
If you're ready for a breakthrough, then you're in the right place because we're here to empower you to take control of your life with simple mindset shifts that create radical transformation.
We'll be diving into topics like personal growth, health, philosophy, spirituality, relationships, success, and mindfulness.
So create some space for yourself and get comfy. It's time to become the badass you were born to be.
So what is an altered state? An altered state is any consciousness level or any level of mental awareness that's different than your waking one. It's different than what you normally use through your everyday life. It's something that just beyond that. I like to think of the mind as a filter. And our personality really allows us to dive into what kind of information we are filtering out from all of our senses. So if we were to walk into a room and feel like we're not worthy, or to feel not confident enough, or maybe shameful, what our brain's going to do is take all the information and filter out all the expressions on people's faces so that we only get the ones that align with whatever we believe. So if we were to walk in and feel confident, feel like, hey, I own the room, this is my room, I've got this, then our brain would be looking for those signals. And so what we want to do is start to train the brain. And if we've been living a certain way for a really long time, that's why the change that we're wanting in our lives is harder. It's because we've decided on and accepted our beliefs, which are our mental filters. And so it wasn't until I was reading through Napoleon Hill's 1937 original edition of Think and Grow Rich that I stumbled into an interesting way to use an altered state that most of us know about, and that's sex. So many of us do sex as a performance activity. We often go with the lust aspect, which leads us to relationships that aren't fulfilled. It leads us to using sex in a way that's very draining instead of empowering. And so what Napoleon Hill says that if you will use sex and you will use your creative energy in those moments, you can do what's called sexual transmutation. And that will allow you to use your sex energy, which is powerful. We know it's the most powerful energy. It's the only thing that we know of that creates life here. And so if you will begin to use that energy, instead of doing it as a performance, instead of doing something where you're in your head the whole time, instead of doing something with constantly multiple different partners, real sex energy is developed through the cultivation of love. It's not enough just to be passionate. It's not enough to just be lustful. You have to develop a sense of love, a sense of intimacy, because that is much stronger. The human body is designed to reproduce. We are biologically wired that way. And that's why oftentimes you'll see people falling in love quickly. And you'll also see them falling out of love. And they go, well, what happened? Well, it's because our bodies produce really great drugs. Love is a mixture of serotonin, oxytocin, some dopamine levels fly up. And it gives us a chemical drug in our brain that allows us to open up to another person, to let down our walls, to maybe lose our inhibitions for a moment. Because that's how the human race is able to stay alive in this space. But you can use sex for other things more than procreating. What I would suggest is that if you do have a partner, and you can do this with yourself, but if you have a partner, if you will start to approach sex in a different way, if you'll start to approach it in a way where you are cultivating more energy, That means that instead of losing space in your mind, you're focused on either letting it go blank or on something that you really want. You have to be there for your partner too. And in order to do that, all you need to do is start listening to your breathing. Oftentimes we bounce in multiple different directions, and that leads us to an intimacy and a bedroom time that seems more automatic and mechanical. And so you have to be very aware. Sex is a mindfulness exercise. Sex is something that can be really beautiful between the two of you. And it can also mean that you start to manifest, or you start to bring into life more things. You can also use it for asking questions. If you start with the intention beforehand, I would like to use my energy, because you can direct your energy. You are a powerful being. If you can use your energy beforehand and think it through, so that when you're actually doing it, you can let go. The purpose of any kind of real altered state is a surrendering aspect. That's why sex is so powerful. There's a moment during sex where you have to surrender, where you just are able to let go of everything, all the tension, all the worry, all the stress. What you'll notice in that peak moment, you are in that meditative state. That's why there are some Eastern traditions like Tantra and Taoism, which use sex energy to harness it, to help heal your body, to help work through things that are going on in your mind. You have to also remember that sex energy isn't just cultivated in the bedroom. It's something when you have someone that you're in love with that happens all of the time. And if you haven't been doing that, what you'll notice is that your relationship has desperately and deeply suffered. Because on an unconscious level, we can always tell that level of sexual attraction. We can tell that level of ferociousness that's still in the relationship, the thing that draws the male and female polarities together. So stop focusing on the orgasm and see instead if you can focus on your breathing and moving your energy. What's amazing when you think about it is that we're typically going in and out of altered states all day long. I mean, sleep is an altered state. When you eat food, it's a little bit of an altered state. When you see friends, again, it's an altered state. When you feel empathetic, you get into an altered state. Anger is an altered state. So the question is, how can you use altered states to allow yourself to do whatever it is that you want? Because anger can be really cathartic. It can allow you to purge emotions, but it can also be very consuming. So it's how we use the state of anger that determines what kind of experience that we have, and whether we end up controlling it or letting it ride out, or it ends up controlling us. So it's important to know, what state do you need to be in at any given moment? Thanks to James Fadiman, Paul Stamets, and Michael Pollan, a lot of the world right now is also waking up to something really powerful, and that is how we can use drugs or plant medicines to change our lives, to change our minds. If you have not tuned into Michael Pollan's book and now Netflix series, How to Change Your Mind, it is definitely worth watching. What we really lack is good education, and oftentimes whenever we don't know about something, we go into it with fear instead of understanding it and realizing how it can help us and benefit us. But I'll tell you, looking through the research on mushrooms and MDMA and how it's helped people with PTSD, how it's had people who have overcome alcoholism, which is something that I have always been, it was the exact reason that I got into hypnosis in the first place, and why altered states to me are so important is because I've seen so many people break addictions. I've seen so many people have been hooked on hardcore drugs come off of them. And all it took for them was to see themselves in a new way. Oftentimes when people have bad experiences, they're doing one of three things. And that is either their set and setting they've messed up on. Set and setting are probably the most crucial and important parts of any kind of experience where you're looking to have something that's spiritual happen, or have a massive breakthrough in your personality, your beliefs, or the way you think about yourself. And that is, you want to have the setup. You want to have where you're at. You don't want to be in a noisy place. You don't want to have someone screaming about. You don't want to have a bunch of people there. So if you can just have one or two people for a mystical experience, that's the recipe for success. The next part where people usually mess up is using drugs as an escape, using them to escape some sort of pain that they're in. And the problem with that is the kind of drugs that we are talking about, the kind of mind-altering substances, are to be used to explore the dark components of our personalities, the hard spots to look at when we're on normal awareness. And so we're not using anything to escape. This isn't to numb the pain or to dull it. This is to bring it into the light. This is to shine a spotlight on that darkness and say, hey, I'm ready to confront this. So you have to be ready for these things. You have to be mentally ready. You have to be physically ready. There's a reason why if you were to travel out to Peru to do ayahuasca ceremonies, they require that you fast oftentimes. They require sometimes that you have no sex. They require that you get rid of alcohol, get rid of sugar, get rid of all the things in your body typically, that even caffeine, that would typically impede you from having a balanced experience. You want the body back sort of at that 0 point so that it can receive the medicine in the right way. When we're constantly bombarded by so many drugs or so many influences in our life, it's hard to tell which way to go. The next thing people do is they have a lack of respect for the medicine. They have a lack of respect for what it is that they're going into, so they rush into it. So it's always do your research. And beyond sex and drugs, there's so many other ways to get into altered states. There's your dream space at night. There's so much to explore in your dream life. Trying to finding out what's going on inside the subconscious mind, what's going on beneath the typical layers of thought. So there's more ways. You can be a runner. You always hear about the runner's high. That's endorphins pumping through your body. Yes, you can use that to be in an altered state. You can use prayer. You can use meditation, which is one of my favorites. You can use yoga. What you will be able to find when you're in an altered state is that time dilates. So if you're constantly looking at the clock or you're constantly thinking, you're not in an altered state. What you want to be doing instead is noticing that there's a period where you are outside of yourself. You're not just the same person you were when you woke up this morning. You don't have the identity with the ego. You're not just the story that you've always been telling yourself. And it's in those moments when we can transform, because we start to see ourselves in a new light. We start to see ourselves in the way that we'd always wished that we were. And so in that way you can transform because your mind finally sees it. It's no longer filtered by our typical belief system. That's why there's so much power in these different realms of thinking. If we always are the person that we are, we'll never be the person that we want to be. And so altered states are important to be able to get into. It can be as simple as breath work. It can be simple as staring at a spot on the wall in front of you. When you are in these altered states, the important part, and why I mentioned set and setting, mindset, where you're at, what's going on around in your environment, is because what you bring into the table oftentimes is what you're going to get out of it. So you want to be thinking positive thoughts, just like you normally would in your regular everyday life. You want to be bringing as much positivity as you can, even when you're dealing with things that are difficult, like maybe forgiveness, or maybe you hold a lot of guilt, or maybe you did something forever ago and now it's finally coming up again and you're realizing, oh my gosh, that instance made me the way I am now, and I'd like to finally break free from that. That's what these states can do for you. And that's why if you're looking for change, it's going to take you getting outside of your box. This is why a lot of times traditional talk therapies don't have the kind of radical transformation immediately. They take a lot of sessions. And it's oftentimes what we're doing is changing our story. What altered states allow you to do is break free from that story completely. To finally go, okay, I dealt with that then. When I was that age, I only knew certain things. I only knew how to deal with stuff in certain ways. If something traumatic happened to you when you're 7 or 8 years old, you approached that situation as a 7 or 8 year old. You didn't approach it as who you are now. And so the state allows you to see that. It allows you to break free and say, oh, that was just what my upbringing was for that moment. And now as an adult, I can see clearly. So now I can have the transformation that I've been looking for. I remember my second mushroom experience. Britt and I, we were at home one night, and we took a low dose, maybe 2.5 grams of mushrooms, and I'm lying on the couch. Britt's sitting there, and she's watching, I want to say Lady Gaga on her laptop. And I'm lying down, and I'm facing away from her. I'm facing nothing but a wall, and it's a big, like emerald, deep emerald, maybe a hunter green wall. And I'm lying there, and I close my eyes down, and suddenly I find myself in almost like an animated world. Now, mushrooms don't always bring animation, neither do the rest of the psychedelics. Sometimes you'll get visuals, sometimes that's not a thing. And so I'm in this experience, and there's this almost like cartoon tree that's above me. And its limbs and leaves are just these long black things, and the whole tree is black except for it. Whatever it rains down, whenever the wind catches and it rains down this green love, and this green love is hitting my body. And I'd never felt until that moment that what love was. And that sounds so weird because Obviously, my parents love me. Britt's in love with me. I've had so much things that I've loved and cared about in my life, but I'd never felt so filled up with love in one moment. And that experience was wild because I started to cry. And as a guy, it's always weird to cry, especially back then. Now it's not, but back then it was weird for me to open up, for me to be emotional, for me to say exactly how it was that I was feeling. And so I'm crying. And what's weird is I turned back to look at Britt, finally opened my eyes again. I turned back to look at Britt, and she's crying too. And in that moment, the two of us were completely connected. What that experience gave me was something that I was unable to grasp with my normal everyday awareness. It's one thing to talk about love. And it's one thing to be in a relationship or to try out love. And it's a different thing to be able to actually know what love is. And in that moment, every single part of my being knew love. And it opened me to a new way of thinking. How I thought about us, how I thought about what our connection was, how suddenly in that moment she meant even more to me because I saw her true self. And Britt was the one that was giving that love to me. It was that tree, but it was her essence. If you've been listening to us for a while, Britt has a lot of spirit signs, and one of those spirit signs is the willow tree. And that tree that I saw was that willow. And as its leaves moved down on me, the only thing that I could feel from it was this deep sense of belonging, this deep sense of it mattered that I was here, a deep sense of what have I been chasing my entire life, and why have I not been putting the emphasis in my life on love? On loving, on being kind, on caring, on being compassionate. Why was I chasing other things more? Because the other things didn't fulfill me in the same way that this was. The other things didn't make me feel like home. They didn't have that sense of home. And so it wasn't like the experience was profound in that I got this massive bolt of lightning. It was that I just felt an intense feeling of emotion. It allowed me to let go, to purge. That's why the tears came out. I'm not exactly sure why that happened, but it allowed me to let go of whatever my subconscious was still holding on to and to embrace love fully, to fully open my arms and wrap myself around it, let it wrap itself around me, and to surrender and to let go and to be in that moment. Because so often we're just rigid. We plan and we strive and we get there, and it's all a march of life instead of allowing it to be a dance of life. And so I started incorporating more love into my life. I started telling people more often, I love you, I care about you. My guy friends included. Hey man, you matter to me. And I started living differently. It was that experience that allowed those parts to open up. I think without the mushroom experience, especially the first one, if you haven't listened to that episode, we covered fully our mushroom experience, that first one that really changed both of our lives completely. So it took me getting out of my own way. It took me not trying to be so tough. It took me figuring out a new way of being. And it was weird because I took mushrooms and it gave me that. And so altered states can be massively useful for transformation, massively useful for you having the next breakthrough of your life. The deal is, though, that I recommend is that you never do more than you're able to transform to. In other words, if I got the information about loving and I couldn't do the loving part, if it was too hard for me, if I couldn't be that vulnerable, if I needed those walls around my heart, then what I needed to do was not take another dose. Because I hadn't figured out what the first one was about. So for me, I use transformations in a slow way. I'm not always looking for the next thing. I'm just looking for what can I handle in this moment and work with that. And work with that until I figure it out, and then I move on. So the freedom that you're looking for is always going to be on the other side of thought. It's just around that corner from you constantly thinking. That's why it's so important for you to build into your schedule times to get out in nature, times to put your feet in the dirt, times to just sit and be alone. Not thinking, not planning out in the future. Those are wonderful things to do. But you have to be able to take a break so that you can make a big change. That's why I love going on vacations. It's not so that I can go see the sights. It's just so I can just get outside of my normal everyday routine. Every time I'm away from that for extended periods, anything 3 days or more, I come back changed. Every single time. There will be something different that I do in my habits. When you come back, you don't have to get right back into your normal routine. You can pause and say, hey, is there anything I'd like to update? Did I learn anything while I was away? Did I learn how to deal with things? Did I learn, maybe did I pick up a new habit from the people that I was around? Did I say, I like to do that. I want to add that to my routine now. And so it's our routines that will be changing us. We'll have the thought will turn into the routine will allow us to play out actions and allow time to pass so that change can be easy. If you've been telling yourself change is hard, that's just a belief. That's just something that you've accepted. So what I recommend is that you spend a moment sitting down and realizing that change can be easy. If you'll start with that belief, it will allow you to do new things, to have new behaviors and new actions in your life. And if this is something that really interests you, I recommend that you get a journal. And any kind of experience that you start having, any kind of time where you go, wow, I just went through a lot of transformation. What did it take? And if you can figure out what it took, hopefully it didn't take suffering. A lot of us change only when suffering is involved. When we just decided one day, you know what, enough is enough. But it doesn't have to always take that. You can have breakthroughs all the time. You don't need to stay exactly who you are. So if this interests you, get that journal out and start documenting. It doesn't have to be elaborate notes. Just write down, hey, I've been doing this, or I noticed this, and these things happened. And just tally it up. Say, was it the time where I fasted? Was it times where I did meditation? Where I was extremely intimate with my partner and we used that energy to cultivate something? Was it taking an experience that a shaman would lead you through? Was it getting back to Mother Nature? Is it doing hypnosis work? Hypnosis is fantastic. It can get you into fantastic states. Dreams. If you've been doing your dream work, start keeping a dream journal. It's so important because you are constantly being given hints. If you will listen closely enough, the hints are always going to be there. But if you're using your normal awareness and you're only just looking at what's right in front of you, or you're not in the present moment, you're projecting out into the future or worrying, or you're living back in the past, then you will not notice them. You won't see the signs. You won't notice the synchronicities. It takes a certain level of awareness. That's why we're always talking in meditation. That's why we're always talking breath work. It's not to do those two things. It's so that you can be present in the moments where you typically wouldn't be. In those moments, you'll always find your answers. The present moment is an altered state. It gives you those miracles that you're always looking for. So that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was all really about self-discovery. Because I think the most important thing you can be doing right now is discovering who it is that you really are. Find out what you stand for. Find out what you are just beyond the labels of what you do for a job, of how old you are, of where you were born, who your parents are, where you went to school. There's more to you than all of that. And what this has been is just a way for you to start thinking about, how do I find out who I am? How do I go on that journey? Because it will heighten and make your experiences more alive so that you feel more fulfilled, so that you start to enjoy things more often. If you enjoyed this episode too, reach out to me. Find me on Instagram at HeyIt'sCarmichael and let me know. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll catch you in the next episode. Peace.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Elevated Life Podcast. Want more? Join us at theelevatedlifeclub.com for mindset upgrades, lifestyle hacks, and spiritual tools to elevate your soul.
Each month features a new masterclass, meditation, yoga practice, and more to help you transform your life one step at a time.
Come join the 7 or Above Club.